inductee is the late Charlie Pribble. I did not have the pleasure of knowing Charlie personally, but I feel like I've gotten to know him pretty well through all of the letters of support and the stories that have been told during this nomination and voting process. And to help illustrate the impact he had on golf here in Iowa, we have three gentlemen who did know Charlie very well. It's my pleasure to welcome up Jeff Wendell, former superintendent and former executive director of the Iowa Turfgrass Institute, Doug Snook, Hall of Fame superintendent, and Greg Mason, the current executive director of the Iowa Section PGA. Guys, come on up.
That's going to help me. If I get too loud, you got to kind of tone me down. I use a microphone often, and I usually can project pretty well. I want to start off and congratulate Barb Berkmeyer and Mark Bagley. Very cool honor. Love you guys. And I want to thank Ranella for the honor of starting Charlie's presentation. I met Charlie Pribble in the mid-70s. It was my very first day as a golf course superintendent. One of my members had told Charlie that they hired a new kid. And so he came walking in the door of my maintenance building and said, "Wendell, what do you need?" I'm Charlie Pribble. And he spent about 3.5 hours there, which was, I think I'd been a superintendent for about 3.5 hours. So the next 3.5 I spent with Charlie. He helped me organize my tools. He knew about every piece of equipment that I had in that building. A lot more than I did. And he talked about my irrigation system, which he had worked with the people that had installed it a little bit, so you know how all that worked. Talked a lot about different practices and stuff that needed to be done on the golf course. And basically what I learned that day was I didn't know much. And Charlie was incredibly intelligent. Helped me for many, many years after that. So that was an amazing first day for me and probably shaped my whole career in terms of my drive to try to learn what I was doing. Charlie had a really special laugh. And there were a lot of nuances, but you could always tell if he was laughing because something was funny, or if he was laughing at you. You could tell because he had a special laugh when you were just being wrong. And the one he used on me most of the time was a laugh that said, "You're being really naive." He started his career in Quincy, Illinois, as summer help, Spring Lake Country Club. I don't have that year. You have to
65.
Yeah, 1965. Then he was an intern and eventually assistant at Happy Hollow in Omaha. Went back to Quincy as superintendent at Quincy Country Club, and then he spent many years at Sunnyside Country Club and finally at Airport National. Charlie was a mentor to a lot of us, several of the Hall of Famers in this room. He was a great innovator. He was a great leader. Of all the people that there's countless superintendents that Charlie mentored. He helped a lot of us. He was really good at being direct. And he definitely taught me that a really good friend tells you when you're wrong. Charlie understood what it takes to balance art and science and be successful in turf management. He's a great innovator, modified equipment, research and develop methods to improve irrigation systems, inspired a lot of us to develop more knowledge of plant pathology and understand the turf diseases that were always looming to try to get us into a new job. He was a leader. He served the Iowa GCSA board from 1977 to 1980. He was certified golf course superintendent, Iowa GCSA president in 1979. He voted the superintendent of the year in 1984, and he received the Iowa GCSA Distinguished Service Award in 2007 and the ITI Meritorious Service Award in 2008. So, final thought, Back in the day, I asked Charlie, how do I get my members to be happy about the green speed? And he laughed. And it was one of those special laughs that made me know right away that he had a brilliant answer. And here's what he said. And I paraphrased a little bit because, you know, G-rated and all that. He said, Wendell, when half your members are mad at you because the greens are too slow and the other half are mad at you because they're too fast, that's when you know you're doing a good job. I'm going to let Doug Snook, CGCS, take over. Thank you very much.
Before he starts, just everybody knows he hand wrote everything. I worked with this.
Charlie, be proud of me. Computers, it's way too old, that's why I have this 50-year pin. Oh, anyway, to Charlie's wife, Nella, son, Chuck, and family, I'm honored to be a small part of to recognize one of the greatest Iowa golf course superintendents whose innovative thinking has had an impact on the game of golf, not just here in Iowa, but nationwide. I'm sure that everybody in this room is associated with golf in one form or another. And I'm assuming that a lot of you play the game. As I look around the room, I can see some guys that have played here in Iowa that are about the best. And I can also see, myself included, some real hacks out there. But whether you're the best or you're a hack, you all have one thing in common. You love those fast greens. Now, whether you can handle fast greens, well, that's to be determined. The survey said that the number one thing that golf course superintendents get as a complaint is green speed. And so if you love your fast greens, you'll have to thank Charlie Pribble. You see, some 40 plus years ago, equipment manufacturers only offered only one thickness of bed bar, and the bed bar is on a mower that controls the height of the cut. So Charlie, dealing with green speed, like we all do at Sunnyside Country Club, he started experimenting with grinding the backs of the bed knives off so that he could achieve a lower height of cut. If you ever had the opportunity to play Sunnyside Country Club way back in the day, you probably walked away saying, wow, those greens were fast. The word got out, and it wasn't long before we started talking to the manufacturers, and now they're providing thin bed bars, and that's what we use today. Another thing that Charlie was, he probably didn't been, but he was one of the pioneers, and that was spoon feeding greens, using straight sand to top dress. These are some of the things that back then none of us really thought about doing, especially cutting greens that close. And he would get it down to an eighth of an inch, and all of it just shuddered because we were using these old bent grass varieties, Pencross and Poa, and it frankly scared us. But Charlie was he wasn't afraid. Charlie had a lot of nerve. I don't have to tell you that Charlie's innovative thinking has had one of the greatest impacts on the game. So when you encounter those fast greens and you miss a 3-footer, you got a 6, 7-footer coming back, you can look up and say, thanks, Charlie. I and many others who served as the president of the Iowa Golf Course Superintendents, actually Charlie just scared the hell out of us. Because when it came time for the state conference, and you had to get up in front of everyone to give the annual meeting, you better have your I's dotted and your T's crossed. Because if you didn't, Charlie would call you on it. He didn't do it to be mean. He didn't do it to be spiteful. He did it because he loved his association and he wanted us to lose that Caddyshack image. Charlie touched and influenced so many in our industry, and I being one of them, from loaning me equipment to helping me with some turf issues to spending time with me as I was given the task to designing an irrigation system for my course. Charlie would drive up, he would spend a couple days helping me with flow rates, friction loss, pipe sizing, nozzle sizing, so forth. He was an irrigation genius. He never accepted anything in return. I could have never done it without him. So I would like to lift my glass. Toast. Charlie. Thank you, Charlie.
Again, congratulations, Barb, Mark, Lurch, Egley. Congratulations, as well. Great to see you. You kind of heard what those two gentlemen just said, but the lessons I learned.
From Pribble was to build relationships, serve your association, serve your college, and serve your family. Those are 4 things that he taught me.
For those that never met Charlie, he had a 54-inch coat and a 26-inch inseam. So I asked him one day, I said, have you ever been in a suit? And so as Chuck and I talked today, it's kind of neat to see him in a tuxedo. I assume that was at your wedding. But he had a larger than life heart too as well. So, but he said he didn't look good in a suit. So you can imagine that. So I almost wore a cardigan today because I couldn't find him. For those that knew Charlie, Charlie wore cardigans. And for us that are old enough, Sansabelt, the old Western cut pants, and he had, as Ranella will tell you, he had a cute ass, but he had no ass. So they were always falling down as well. And then he also wore wingtips. And he never tied them because he didn't want to bend over. And Chuck said he polished those shoes all the time. You know, Pribble was one of the great men, but when he hitched up to those sleeves, I just remember him all the time because we built Airport National together, but he hitched those cardigan sleeves up all the time and you knew he was going to get to work at that time. So I was blessed in my early career as an assistant professional, worked with some golf course superintendents that were pretty good. Hall of Famer Steve Tyler, who was going to be here today but was not able to. Stay Green Dean Fagerlin, Tom Klein, Ken Laserbeam Ellenson, and even the current Glen Oaks superintendent, Chris Cohn. Because of this, I had little idea that the impact that Pribble had already on the people in his profession. So as I began building Airport National with Mark Lemon, I was privileged to work alongside Pribble as he was the Rainbird irrigation specialist at the time. So this is back in 1991. So we spent the whole winter, and I remember going to the basement of the Pribble house and spending time with him there, talking irrigation, equipment, budgeting, buildings, marketing, staffing, and I soon found out through our talks that it was more than just golf related. It was about life. So. But Pribble started working with me at that time, and as we built, as he did the irrigation, the other one was Mr. Mulvihill from Tri-State. I finally asked Pribble one day, I said, Pribble, do you want to get back to being a superintendent? And he said, I'd love to. And I know Ranella probably appreciated that too, because he was on the road all the time, as you can imagine, as a traveling salesman. So I asked Pribble, I said, we got a chance to build this golf course together, would you like to work for us? And he said yes. So Red Dog Lockheed and I had already started construction in the fall of '92 at Airport, and he would stop by and still talk and give me advice at that time. So when we finally said yes to us, I told Ed Schumann, who was one of my mentors, that Charlie Pribble was going to work for me at Airport National. And he said, well, all I could do is how great our golf course would be with Pribble at the helm, because he could grow grass on concrete, and you heard that from Snook on that as well. So, but he also stated that Pribble has forgotten more than most superintendents will ever know. Pribble saves us a lot of money during construction, from the equipment to the irrigation to running the construction alongside Red Dog and I. We built that golf course in the midst of the 1993 floods and rains. We should have never got it done, but with his guidance and surefire way of finding another way to get things done helped us see us through. So that amazed me about Pribble was even though he knew what he was doing, he was never afraid to call a colleague to confirm what he was thinking or to persuade him that there was another way to do it. was the one man in the golf business that truly taught me that when you are stuck, find out the answer from someone that does know what the answer is. Don't just guess. Don't be afraid to be mentored by others, as they have been maybe through that same issue and can help you. He also wasn't afraid to mentor others. The people that would call him on a daily basis for advice was staggering. That was the early years of the bag cell phone, for those that remember that. So I saw the volume of calls because I was the one writing the checks to the cellular company. Many of those calls would spark another idea for Pribs to say, Mace, I think I have a solution that we should try. Or I was talking to so-and-so and this is what they are doing. He was teaching me that maybe you should give a colleague a call for help, advice, assistance. I know that both Steve Tyler and Doug Snook spoke often about what he did in their profession. Many a time I would hear about Pribs stopping by a golf course out of the blue and assist a golf course superintendent with some issue, as Jeff just talked about earlier. Both Jeff and Snooker talked about in their presentations today is when you needed help, Pribs was there to encourage you when you needed it, but he was also there to kick you in the butt when you needed that as well. He was known for his ability to yell at on a very short fuse, but 5 minutes later he was laughing with you, and many laughs, right, Jeff? With you, as I never saw him carry a grudge. It was just his way to communicate with you. I always listened to the message, and not how he was saying it. I'm sure you've had that a few times, Chuck. Trips through his early work with the Iowa Golf Course Superintendents and the ITA showed me the importance of serving in association committees, the board, and to be an officer, to truly give back to your association. He was the one person in 2004 that said, I think it is time for you should run for office in the Iowa PGA. Though I had not been at airport for a couple years, we still kept in touch. I always heeded his advice when I needed it. He would always tell me, you will get back more than you ever give if you serve. Boy, that was another great lesson taught to me by Pribs. Pribs was one of the first calls that I made when we were devastated by the EF5 tornado in Parkersburg at Legend Trail. Rick Tegmeyer was my second call, by the way. What would you do to fix these greens? And you can imagine the damage that we had at their golf courses. What changes would we make to the maintenance building that was leveled? He was not very mobile by then, but I know he would have come and helped out if he could. Because of my relationship with Pribs, he was giving me some great contacts on the superintendent side of things. Again, relationship building is what Pribs was so good at. To say this man has guided me through some tough times does not give justice. So obviously the floods in '93, and then he was the second person that I hugged after my wife when we lost our parents in 1998 car accident. So I'll be ripped that day. He only lived about 3 blocks away from us, so it was a pretty easy drive. I said in my letter of support for Pribs' interest in the Iowa Golf Hall of Fame, this piece of paper cannot show you how many people Pribs has touched in his profession in terms of wisdom and guidance on items related to their facilities. It cannot show you the people Pribs touched within the community and his church. I just know the stories I hear from his colleagues and my fellow PGA professionals as to the impact that he had on them personally as well as professionally. Even those that only know him by name and never met him in profession reached out upon his inclusion into the Hall of Fame. I told you earlier he had a big heart. Whether he was yelling at you or laughing with you, you always knew he was pulling for you to succeed. All I can say is I'm just proud that Charlie Pribble is in the Hall of Fame now. And Ranella, on behalf of the golf profession, whether you're a superintendent or a salesperson or a golf PGA professional, we want to welcome Charlie Pribble to the Hall of Fame, Iowa Golf Hall of Fame. And please come up to get your plaque.
First of all, I want to thank the men responsible for Charlie's nomination and letters of support. I read the nomination packet several times. You guys were around Charlie too long and knew him way too well. He was a working superintendent, and I never knew what fragrance would waft through the house when he came home from work. Would it be fertilizer, fungicide, insecticide, or herbicide, or maybe a splash of diesel fuel? And cleaning out his pockets was a necessity on laundry day. I'd find nuts and bolts, greasy shop rags, and of course his trusty pocket knife. He was at this job for almost 50 years and saw the profession progress from being a greenskeeper and dragging hoses and sprinklers to the place of becoming a golf course superintendent, and where he could remotely operate the computer program for the irrigation system from our living room. But some things didn't change. He and I would still have to run over to the golf course and cover up the annuals with bed sheets if the nighttime temperature dropped too low for the annuals he had just planted. Charlie would have greatly appreciated this recognition, as he thought the greatest honor came from the ones given to him by his peers, and this honor fits that requisite. I was always proud to be Mrs. Charlie, and I am tonight. So my son and I say thank you for the Charlie.